Have you ever heard the term, you should not put all your eggs in one basket? Well, I did not follow that rule, and currently 50% of my portfolio is invested in one stock. So, why did I do this? What's really my thesis? Should you do the same? And finally, how is it going? Well, the stock I invested in was Google. I think I don't really need to explain what Google is, but for the old folks out there, Google is a tech company that runs the world's most popular search engine. It owns YouTube, the current platform you're watching this on, and the Android operation system. On top of that, Google makes apps, cloud services, and devices like phones. In short, it connects people to information and technology worldwide. Nevertheless, why did I invest 50% of my portfolio in this one big tech stock? Well, first of all, at the time I invested in the company, it was extremely cheap. And when I say cheap, I mean really cheap. There's a metric called price to operating cash flow. Basically, it compares a company's operating cash flow to its stock price. Now, the reason I focused on this instead of price to free cash flow, which is the more popular way of looking at a stock's valuation, is because price to free cash flow makes more sense when a company isn't spending heavily on new projects. But in Google's case, they're pouring a ton of cash into AI, infrastructure, and other big bets. That kind of spending makes free cash flow look smaller than it really is, and in turn, the price to free cash flow ratio less useful. So, by looking at price to operating cash flow, we get a clear picture of how cheap the stock was at that moment without all the distortion from their heavy investments. So, what was Google's operating cash flow at the time I invested? About 17. Now, for reference, Apple at the same time had a price to operating cash flow of around 30, and I would argue that both companies hold a kind of monopoly in their respective spaces. But here's the thing, just because a company looks cheap on paper doesn't automatically mean it's a great deal. There's usually a reason the market is pricing it that way. So the real question becomes, what justifies this valuation? First of all, Google has a lot of growth potential. The company is operating in the cloud space, which is a really high growth sector, growing over 15% every year. That's a huge tailwind for them. In addition to that, their core business is also still growing. Google search and other revenue have been growing about 10% on average over the past 3 years, which is crazy considering how big the company already is. Lastly, Google has something that most companies dream of, a moat, basically a monopoly. They own around 90% of the search market share, which is almost impossible to beat. On top of that, they also own YouTube, which is still thriving. No competitors can really touch them because of their brand name and how deeply they're embedded in people's lives. And if that's not enough, they also have an insane success rate with acquisitions. They've bought and built up companies in a way that shows they can get really high returns on invested capital. That just proves the management team knows what they're doing and can keep up growth beyond their core business. Taking all of this into consideration, paying 17 times operating cash flow in my eyes seemed extremely cheap for such a high quality company. So I went all in. Well, not literally all in, but about 50% of my entire portfolio. So, how is it going so far? Am I in the red or am I profiting? Well, in this case, I made the best investment of my life. From the day I invested in the company until today, I've made around 50% in profit. Now, this is huge because it means that over the past year, my portfolio's average return has skyrocketed to around 35.73%, which is just remarkable. Honestly, I'm still kind of shocked at what smart investing can actually do. But of course, some of this was luck. A lawsuit against Google's monopoly was declined, which gave the stock a huge jump in price. So, should you do the same as me? Well, unless you're 100% sure, which let's be honest, you probably never are, then no. I'd rather recommend investing in a few, maybe 5 to 10 quality stocks to spread your risk a bit. That said, if you're really serious about it and have done your homework, you could invest a large sum into one stock. That's actually something Warren Buffett believes in too, going big on a company you truly trust.
Companies, and we couldn't get that much money in. Sometimes it's because the prices moved up after we bought them. Sometimes it's because we may be selling the position down even. But so we have there's nothing magic. We like to put a lot of money in things that we feel strongly about, and that gets back to the diversification question. You know, we we think diversification is, as practice generally, makes very little sense for anyone that knows what they're doing. Uh,
Of course, none of this is financial advice, But none of this would have been possible without trustworthy and reliable financial data, which you can get via the EODHD API key. They offer extremely accurate financial data that you can fetch fast and immediately. Big thanks to EODHD for sponsoring this video, and definitely check them out. The link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. Now, if you want to learn more about finding stocks like these, watch this video right here.